Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Danny Morley.
And today, me and Danny are going into boundaries and what that journey's been like for us. You have quite the story. I've also created my first boundary ever in my entire life. I'm 35 years old, and I just created my first boundary. So where is my sticker? Because that was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life and thus far in my journey. But I would love for you to share what it's been like to create a huge boundary. Like when I saw you set this boundary with, and you're about to go into it, I was really like in a place where I was like looking up to you. And I was like, that is a power move right there. And clearly, you did a lot of work to get to that place where you could create that boundary. So I'd love for you to just dive into all that.
Yeah. Before we get started with my specific story, I want to just talk about like boundaries in general.
Mm-hmm.
And both Ellie and I are highly sensitive people. So something that we work a lot with Masters of Self University. And highly sensitive people really suck at creating boundaries because we never want to cause harm. It's in our nature, it's part of our nature as a highly sensitive person, is we know how much it sucks to feel pain because we're so sensitive. So we never want to cause that in another human being or animal or anything. We really know what it means to feel emotional pain. And because of that, we don't want to cause anyone else to feel it. And so when it comes to setting boundaries, there's this really weird thing where we have to find our power to set the boundary. And then we have to know that it is going to create some level of pain. It's not create, that's the wrong word. There is going to be some level of pain that's triggered in the person that we're setting the boundary with. But that has nothing to do with us, as long as we're doing it in a very loving way. Now, love is power, power is love. So that doesn't mean being really nice. Being nice and being loving is not the same thing. Sometimes we have to be very direct and very firm, and that is a form of love. Love is not rainbows and butterflies. It can be, but it is also being very firm and honoring our own pain. Loving ourselves means honoring our own pain. If that means right now I'm angry, I need to go away and be on my own and move through this anger in a healthy way so I don't project it on anyone else. That's what we've got to do. So as a HSP, it's really difficult because we know when we set this firm boundary, when we tell someone what it is that we're moving through, and because of that, we need some kind of space. It's going to cause them to run their programs, feel hurt, feel maybe betrayed, feel abandoned, feel like they're not being taken into consideration or being loved. And that's hard because we all know that as a HSP, when we set a boundary, they're going to feel the pain that probably we feel. So what happened in my case, I set a boundary recently with one of my parents. This parent I'd been super enmeshed with, which I didn't even realize until this last 6 months that it was even enmeshment. I had no idea because I was so enmeshed. I was so unconscious to the way that this relationship was showing up and playing out. And I finally realized this year that I need some space to be able to see really what happened to me as a child emotionally. How did I really feel? And I couldn't really see or feel what was happening because the enmeshment was so strong. And so this year I set a boundary with one of my parents, and It was more of a soft boundary. It was a, hey, I need space. Please respect this. And it was all going reasonably well until I received, it was a birthday recently, and so there was some mild communication. I knew that this was going to trigger something. The anxiety of anticipation coming up to this period, because it's both my parents' birthdays within a few days. I knew that it was gonna, and my stepdad's as well, like all around the same period. I knew that it was going to trigger some level of some confrontation around the boundaries that I'd set, and yeah, it did. And I received a picture, and it triggered me, and I got really angry as I was looking at this picture, and I realized that like the boundaries that I'd set, I'd been very soft with. I tried to be very loving, but I wasn't in my power. I wasn't honoring the kid that was really felt hurt inside. And so I set a very strict, very firm boundary and said, please do not contact me. And I need to honor what it is that I'm feeling. Because one of the things is I was feeling a lot of anger. This is suppressed anger that I've had my entire life. And I've been holding it in, holding it in, holding it in. And I don't want to project that onto my parents.
Yeah.
I don't want to project that onto you or anyone else. And I found now I keep projecting it onto our dogs, because when they don't behave perfectly, this anger comes out. And so I'm working on it there as well. I don't want to project this onto my parents. So I'm setting the boundary so I don't do that, so that I can work on this on my own. And if you set a boundary, if someone really loves you, they will honor that boundary. If I say to you, hey, can you just give me a day?
Yeah.
And just respect that, and just respect my space, or give me however long it is. The loving thing to do is to honor that person, because you know that they're in pain. But as I mentioned earlier, it gets really difficult when you set the boundary and then you know that the person you set the boundary with is going to be triggered, they're going to go into their pain. And it's come back. There's other family members that have started making comments and saying things, and I can tell that there's people that are feeling really hurt by this boundary. And ultimately, all I'm doing is just trying to honor the inner child that feels hurt within me. And in doing that, saying, I don't want to be too communicated with right now. And I didn't say it. I said, please, I didn't say anything like mean or nasty. But the way that we interpret things, because of our own programs, are very, very, very different.
It gets filtered through our programs, and that becomes our experience. And I'd like to first say, even your first boundary was powerful, because you've never created a boundary before in your life with this person, and you guys have a very close relationship. And so it's never been a thing that you guys even take time apart to not speak, or it wasn't like you guys spoke once a month. It was much more than that.
Super regular.
Yeah.
Yeah. So regular that like I didn't realize how regular. And that's enmeshment, is like I needed them, they needed me. And it's this codependent, attached, enmeshed relationship where I'm 30 years old. I need to mature mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I physically started to mature. It's time to raise my mental and emotional maturity up to match my 30-year-old self. And that means letting go of my parents and becoming, my inner child showing up, becoming that, what we term at Masters of Self University, the mystical parent, evolving our inner child to a point where they're matching the level of maturity that we are, because we are a divine being. The only thing that holds us back from accessing that connection is all of the programs and wounds from our childhood.
Yeah. And let me ask you, so after you created the second firm boundary, what did it bring up within you?
So much powerlessness. So much powerlessness. Every day, including the last, every day since the boundary, I think about it, because I know everyone's getting triggered. from this boundary.
Right.
Not everyone, but like.
And what happens is the person that creates the boundary actually becomes the villain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It brings out the victimizer,
Right.
victim consciousness programs
Yep.
of, he's hurting me, I'm the victim, like he's doing this to me.
Yep.
And all that I'm really doing is saying, please don't talk to me right now, I'm in pain.
Yeah.
Please don't talk to me right now, I need to love myself.
Yeah.
And if I love myself, then I can offer that same love to another.
Yeah.
But while I continue to be enmeshed, attached, codependent, I'm never going to be able to truly understand how to love myself and offer that same love to every single individual being, dog, plant, animal, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to offer that love to anyone if I don't really learn to offer it to myself. And it's super challenging because that's the railing that I've been holding on to my whole life. And the way that I've been programmed is to create this this need to hold, like it's a reciprocal way of like, I need them and they need me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is unhealthy. And I realized that it was time to evolve out of this and to step into my power and start to really grow. And as you said, like, it just brings up so much. I would think about the hurt and the pain that they would be going through. And then I would have to go in and start loving myself and doing the whole process all over again. Because the weak thing to do would be to reach out and check in. But then I'm crossing my own boundary that I've set. And so if I'm not respecting my own boundary, then how the hell are they going to respect it? So this is why it's called Masters of Self University. It's all about mastering the relationship we have within ourselves so that then we can master the relationships with other people.
Okay, the way that we show up to others is how they're going to show up to us. So if we create a boundary, right, and then we break it, they're like, okay, I guess that wasn't serious anyway, so I'm going to break it too. But the moment you really put your foot down, you're like, no, this is steady. This is strong. You don't get to break this one down. That's where they could feel the energy of that. I wrote down like everything's energy. So I was talking to a friend recently and she was like, yeah, I created my first boundary with my mom and my sister. And then the next day they just flicked it and then they were back doing everything that they were doing. And I was like, because you didn't come from a place of power, just simply creating a boundary, but you haven't actually gone into the programs that run, which cause you to not have this strong boundary in the first place. That's what needs your attention in order for you to create this solid placeholder to be like, hey, I need space. And I remember you gave this really great analogy. It was like the enmeshment of like when this parent is like hovering over you and you're feeling all of these things, you can't process what's actually coming up from you until you go, hey, can you stop hovering? Can you go over there in the corner so I can really feel what's coming up for me? And like, that's what the boundary was. And I'm watching you in real time move through everything. And I know how much you have, so much of your love has been geared towards this person. Like the way you used to talk about this person was like the most magical being on the planet. And to see you do this from a place of power and your growth has expanded me in so many ways and like really made me look inward as to why like I can't create boundaries and like what's going on within me that doesn't allow me to go, hey, I need space. And it also for me is the enmeshment piece.
Yeah, we've got the same program in that kind of way, like that enmeshed parent that it's just super unhealthy attachment.
Yeah.
Like
super unhealthy.
Yeah. And it digs in so deep. And yeah, as I was starting to see the pain that was really at the root of my suffering from my childhood, I couldn't fully look at it. I couldn't see it because there was all this, I could feel there was all this attached energy.
Right.
And it was causing distortion and illusion. And it was like, intuitively, I knew like the only way for me to be okay is to truly be on my own. And that means energetically. Like physically, yeah, I took a little trip. This all happened. I took a little trip, a couple of days, and and went off in my van and spent some time alone. And that was what this whole trip was about. It was only a couple of nights. And I just really needed to be alone to figure these things out. But as I was spending this time alone, I realized that physically, there isn't important to spend physical time alone to get that separation. But even if you're spending time alone, if you're connected energetically, you're not truly alone. You're still attached to someone or something in a very deep and meshed way, like I was. Even though I was spending this time alone, the energy is still there. Like, I'll give you this example. If you take a hair strand and you clip it and you send, this is how actually I work with my physical body. You send it off to somebody, even though I'm not physically connected to the DNA of my hair, as I change, a scientist can look at that DNA and watch the hair molecule change as well. You take two particles and separate it over space. As one particle, you can look this up, this is quantum physics, it's real science. As one particle is affected by something, the other particle, I forget the word, but it's to do with energetic entrainment, the other particle will be affected as well. So like the way that like I work with a coach for my physical body is bioresonance, and this coach, doctor person has a strand of my DNA from my hair, and through that she can look on a computer, run it through tests, and understand what's happening in active time, even though I'm not with her, or what's happening inside in my body because of the energetic entrainment. So when even though we're not physically there, when we're energetically attached, there still is, you're still in that enmeshed energy. Until we decide within ourselves and create that firm boundary, then it opens the door for us to start to go in and do the work. Now, just setting the boundary isn't enough. It has to be followed with doing the real work.
Yeah.
And what that looks like for us is going inside ourselves. When I feel that powerlessness, when I don't feel okay and I've set this boundary, instead of going back to my partner or a parent or a friend or something outside of me to find some level of comfort, which is what I did in the past. Like, I would be at university and I would have a really bad hangover and I'd go home to spend time with this parent for a weekend because I didn't feel very good and I clearly needed some comfort to nurse myself back to health. Like, that's not healthy when you're in your 20s. Like, I needed to evolve beyond that. Like, what you choose to do with your life is entirely up to you. That's your own power. But I decided that it was time for me to elevate beyond that. And I've lost my train of thought now.
That's okay.
Where are we going with that?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about this like energetic entrainment. Okay. So I'm going to give a really quick story. So what I'm working through currently is I grew up very enmeshed with both my parents, and I didn't move out to my home till I was 24 years old. And so it has been one twisted entanglement of energies, right? And so recently what I'm working through is how I've attached myself to my shadow self. And obviously the shadow self is also everything that I've ever absorbed from my parents. And I was moving through this healing where I started to really separate myself from the shadow self. And I started really seeing that none of this was me or none of this is mine, but I'm here to obviously, alchemize all of these things because I've absorbed it. And after this session that I did with myself, I felt so much lighter. And I felt for the first time, like, I just felt like this heavy weight lift off of me. And as soon as I got out of it, one of my parents texted me. And my mom texted me. And my mom and I don't speak that often. And her text to me was, "I miss you." And I was like, wow, that is so crazy that the moment that I literally started healing this attachment, this enmeshment, this entanglement, out of the blue, she texts me, and it's not out of the blue. It's because this is what it is. Yeah. We are connected in this way. So whatever I'm moving through, she unconsciously is also feeling all of that.
100%. Yeah, it's like if you ever been with a partner, you break up, and then you find a new partner or you meet someone new, and suddenly that old partner just messages you out the blue.
Mhm.
Why? Because they start to feel you energetically pulling
Yes.
away. That enmeshed energy, that attached, connected energy, all of a sudden is letting go because it's finding something else to attach onto. And so, yeah, this is where I was going. Is it's not enough to just set the boundary. We have to go within ourselves, just like you were saying, and do that deep work and find what is it that's being triggered right now in me that I need somebody else outside of me to be okay.
Mhm.
And I have so many programs of insecurity, and really been healing a lot of that. And I tell you, like, our relationship now versus like when we started out, and even like all of my relationships prior, like I was so insecure
Mm.
within myself. I was always worried that, that something's going to come up, and it still comes up, like that you're going to leave for whatever reason. And that's my own stuff to go into. And yeah, it's not enough to just set the boundary. It's set the boundary and then find your power in the boundary.
Right. Yeah. And it's Aries season, and this is the beginning of the new year. It's all about new beginnings. And I've been working through a lot of mom stuff. A lot of, we're always working through that. And I went through this really big healing, and I realized like it's time for me to really set this boundary. And it has been so difficult for me. I've battled it for so long because I don't want anyone to be triggered. I don't want anyone to feel sad. I don't want anyone to be in pain. And I definitely don't want to be the person that causes it. Right. And so I've struggled to create a boundary. You should see my notes app in my phone. I have made many attempts to really write out what I'm asking for and to honor myself and my journey. And I have never sent it. And then the first day of Aries season, I was in yoga, and all I kept feeling was my soul telling me it's time. Like, you need to go into this space to really heal all of this without having them being there all the time, whether it's simply sending a text, whether it's simply sending like a video over Instagram about a dog, whatever it is, right? Right now, what I felt intuitively was like, I need my space to really just process my upbringing. And after yoga, I wrote out this whole text, and I basically came from a place of just pure love. Before, all of the text that I wanted to send came from resentment, came from hatred, came from a lot of anger. And this time around, because I had worked through a lot of it, I was coming from a place of just really just, hey, this is really hard for me to write, but I'm working through a lot of things right now. And I just ask for space as I process this, because I don't want to show up in this relationship anymore with either of you with all of this resentment and this anger and this hatred, and feeling like all I'm doing ever is walking around with all this emotional baggage. I need to spend time with myself to just honor my pain so that eventually I can show up in this relationship with nothing but presence and unconditional love, and just honoring where they're at and not needing them to be any one different or needing them to change. But I knew that there was a still wanting for them to change. There was a still need for them to be different so that I can feel better. And so I created the first boundary. I sent it over. And then one of my parents responded back really beautifully and said, of course, we'll always respect what you're asking for. And I knew that the only reason this parent responded in that way was because the energy that I was coming from was from a place of power, right? And so it has been a week since that boundary has been set in place. Has it been hard? Yeah. I think about it all the time. There are moments where I'm like, maybe she's hurting, maybe he's hurting, maybe, they need me to call them. And then I drop into my heart space. I'm like, Ellie, for the first time, you're actually honoring yourself, and you're actually learning what it means to love and respect you. So go with it and stay with it, and they'll be okay. And I even send the text message, whatever it brings up within you. I hope that you're really powerful enough to feel it. We take on so many people's stuff, and we go, let me carry it for you. Let me heal it. Let me do this. Let me do that. And it's like all you're doing is perpetuating the cycle of powerlessness in yourself and in them.
Yeah, that's what it is. So I just wrote down as powerlessness. And you said that earlier, like, I don't want to be the person who causes the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And when we set boundaries, as long as we're doing it from a loving place, it might not feel like it, but we are not actually creating or causing harm. Creating a boundary and triggering someone in that triggers someone into their own pain, that's not your pain. That's not the pain that you're creating. That's already within them. That's
Mm-hmm.
just being reflected back to them. That is their responsibility, just like our pain is our responsibility. Now, the powerlessness, like when we don't set the boundary or we don't follow through with it being firm, like that is just this projection of our own powerlessness. And
Mm-hmm.
when we worry about, it's the same thing when we worry about the pain that someone else is going to have to feel, that's the part of us that still feels powerless. That's the part of us that if I set this boundary and say, hey, I need space, and I think that this person can't handle having that space, I'm disempowering them. Think about that. If I'm saying, I don't think you're powerful enough to handle the emotions that come up by me wanting a little bit of space right now, that is disempowerment at its finest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what all of this is finding like the power within ourselves. That's what we teach. That's the course that we teach, is to find the power within. It's the basic program that we move every student and client through at Masters of Self University. It's fundamental. It's finding our own power.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we do this process, setting boundaries, you're not perfect. Even if you find your power or find a little bit of it and you set a boundary, it's going to get a little messy. And that's normal. Our minds really want to go black and white, make it, it's either going to be perfect or I don't want to do it. It's all part tricks of the mind. You are not going to show up perfectly with setting boundaries, and that's okay because no one is perfect. But as long as we're all working towards setting enough healthy boundaries within ourselves, with other people, in order to honor our pain, that's the most important thing. Now, we always talk about this book. I always keep it right next to me. I've got several copies down there. But if you want to understand a little bit more of what we're talking about, Mason's Way, the Universal Ways of Oneness, will talk all about this in terms of how to honor our own pain, how to love our own pain, how to be responsible enough to set the boundary. Because the best thing that we can do for another human being is show up powerfully for ourselves. Once we learn to show up powerfully for ourselves, we give that opportunity for somebody else to step into their power and face their pain. And who doesn't want to create a world that is stepping into their power? Because power is love. And that means we're creating a world of more love. And not this spiritual woo-woo bullshit love that everyone thinks, oh, it's all being nice. And it's no, love is going into your pain and being okay with it. Love is unconditional. That means no matter how I show up right now, I'm going to give you love. That doesn't always mean being nice. That was a really hard pill for me to understand and swallow. Sometimes being overly affectionate, giving so much attention, that isn't the most loving thing you can do to somebody. Sometimes someone needs to find that from within themselves. And our minds just want to jump onto this black and white thing. And when you do set this boundary, if you're thinking about creating one, because I feel like this is a huge thing that everyone's going through now in the collective, is realizing these relationships that we've been in, seeing some codependence, seeing some enmeshment, seeing some attachment, and maybe looking to do the deeper work to evolve out of that. Understand that they might not understand what it is that you're talking about, and that's okay.
Yeah.
When I set this boundary, I do not expect my parents to understand what it is that I'm talking about, because they are not doing this deep inner work. I do not expect them to. There's a part of me that wants them to, and that's the disempowered part of me. That's the powerless part of me. But they might not understand.
Yeah.
That's perfectly okay.
Yeah. And for those people at home who are listening, but what if but I need them to do the work and all this stuff. It's like energetically detach from that, because we all have choices in life. each of our souls are on our own individual journey, right? But there's so much codependence, there's so much attachment, there's so much powerlessness that we don't see that. That's where we're always trying to be Captain Save-A-Ho. We got to save everybody. But who's not actually being saved? Yourself. So learning how to energetically detach. And I think for me, the reason why it was so hard for me to create a boundary for so long was because there was still this wounded inner child where she thought that there was only whatever love I ever received, that was the only thing that I've ever experienced when it came to love. So she did not want to let that go, right? And I knew that the moment that I created that boundary, that would be severed, that would be quote unquote taken away. But then I had to get to a place where my inner child was like, oh, it doesn't come from mom and dad at all. And doesn't come from your boyfriend or your best friend or anybody. It actually comes from me. That was the moment where I was like, nice, boo, we're growing up and this is what it is. And now we can create the boundary. So now it's like those programs I used to run of like, but like, what if I need them? And like, they're not there. And like, all of that has completely been transformed. And now I'm in a place where like, if I run into a rock, if I fumble, if I get lost in the sauce in my suffering, like I have me and I can get through it. And that is where I had to get to create the boundary.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You said an awesome word in there, severed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about that word, severed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, severed. Because it's like the energetic umbilical cord that is still attached to to mom and dad.
And then when you set these boundaries,
snip, snip.
And what does that create? When you snip that cord, what happens? What happens in you? What's happened in your life?
Now it felt like I had no one to lean on. Like I had no one to save me. I had no one to tell me like, it's going to be okay. No one to coddle me. No one to tell me like, I'm here for you. I'll do anything for you. And that's what I was letting go when I severed that cord. But it was like, Ellie, this is exactly why you've been stuck in cycles for so long in codependency, in attachment, in enmeshment, was because you don't know and you didn't understand that that's all within you. And you don't need to be in this very unhealthy, toxic relationship with your parents because all they've ever taught me is we'll always be here for you throughout everything and we're always going to catch you when you fall. And it's like, that doesn't allow me to ever grow up and find my own feet and walk on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said no one to save me. And that's what happens to us. We have to move through that as we set this boundary. That's also what they feel, the person that we're setting this boundary with.
Yeah.
For my example, for both of us, we're talking about parents here, right? So severing that cord, to us, it feels like a power move. To them, it may feel hurtful because they're still attached. They're still needy. They're still codependent. Why? Because although they are the parent, they are showing up like a child. They need our love. They need us. Needing is not love. Yeah. Needing is not love. We're on sync. I love it.
Yeah.
Needing is not love.
Yeah.
So when our parents are showing up in that needy way, just understand that they are showing up like a child in that moment. That is not to say they're inferior. We're not trying to put them down or blame or any of that here. We're just simply stating the truth of like, when someone shows up like that in my life, when they need me to show them love and attention and affection, when I'm saying I've got pain showing up and I need to honor that, that isn't very loving. Isn't loving us. If someone was curled up in a ball right now, in the corner and in pain, and I showed up, hey, can you stop feeling your pain right now and come love me because
oh my God, yeah,
I need you right now. And the person would be like, bro, I'm in pain. I'm bleeding. Like I just got beaten up. Like I'm really hurting right now.
Yeah.
No, I need you. Come here. I need you. That isn't loving. The loving thing to do right there would be like, hello, sir. Let's just say there's a guy. Like, are you okay? How can I support you right now?
Beautiful.
Can I give you a hug? Can I offer you a blanket? Or do you just need space to work through whatever it is that you're going through? That's love.
Yeah.
And these boundaries that we set, they're not forever. They can be if that's what you need, but they're not forever. We don't have to keep these boundaries going our whole lives. It's just as we move through our periods of healing, it is important to create that space and that energetic detachment. Now, I want to get into this because you mentioned earlier about energetic attachment, right? So let's talk a little bit about what that means for both of us and how we get there. And yeah, what do you go into a little bit of like energetic detachment because you've been feeling this, you've been working through it. What does that mean for you?
I mean, I think that because I grew up so enmeshed, we inevitably absorb whoever your caregiver's programs. And especially, I think for those of us who grew up in with enmeshed caregivers. And so for me, I can constantly feel my parents. Like every time I get triggered into my wounds, like certain energies, like I'm constantly like I'll start writing down like the programs that are running, and I'm like, oh, this is my mom or this is my dad showing up right now. And it just shows that we were really just entangled. I constantly look at it as like, like a DNA strand and how like all of it just like wraps together. Like
Mhm.
it's both of them and me just wrapped up in one, like just colossal DNA shit. And so energetic detachment for me means now I'm understanding deeper and deeper that I'm not my pain. I've been so attached to my pain. I've
Mhm.
been so attached to my programs that I've thought that all of it was the truth of who I was. And now I'm in a place where I'm constantly pulling it in front of me and going, this isn't me, this isn't mine. And I need to start energetically detaching from all of this so that I can tap into the truth of who I am and then grow my light. And literally every day, it's like opening my heart and like blasting these programs with my light. But before, it was so hard for me because I was one with them.
Mm.
So I thought that was me. That's not me. And so that's been huge for me, the energetic detachment. Also seeing like, all right, this is my program that I run, but this is where it derived from. And this is a program that I run, and that's where it came from. And I'm also in a place where I say to myself, like, whatever is not mine, like I release this back to like the original place because I remember as a kid, I used to sit next to like my grandma who was always depressed or like my mom, and I'd be like, just give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. Like literally would say that because I was like, I never wanted as an HSP for people to feel sad or people to be in pain. And now all those memories of when I did that pop up now that I'm energetically detaching. And so I'm like, whatever is mine, I am responsible and I'm going to alchemize and transform any of this. But whatever is not mine, you got to go because I'm not carrying you. My back is breaking. All right. I don't need to carry this anymore. And that came from a place of power. I think before I would have been like, no, let me still carry it. I'll do it all. And it's like, no, sis, you do what you got to do. And everything else that doesn't belong to you, let it go back to its original owner.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the work we teach at MSU in terms of opening our heart and that internal alchemy process, the outcome is energetic detachment, the step by step process in the power within. You learn it as a byproduct of the work. It's integrated within the work that we teach. Energy can only be experienced, right? So this is only we can use words for this by saying energetically detached. We're trying to create that detachment, but because energy can only be experienced, the only true way for a being to understand what that means is to go through the process within themselves, is to feel what it feels like to have energetic detachment, to release that cord, that binding, that intrusion, whatever it is that our shadow self is holding on to because it thinks it needs something. When we do the work that we teach, find your power within, when we do that, it creates energetic detachment and it allows us to see clearly what it is, why we're holding on to things so much. The way of truth, one of the universal ways of oneness, will really help with that because as it shines the golden white light rays of truth upon all of your shadow self, you can see what it is and why you're carrying it. And it's super common to just be carrying around a bunch of programs, a bunch of wounds, or a bunch of stuff, a bunch of energy that you're carrying around within yourself and within your fields that isn't even yours.
Yeah.
It is, you're just attached to it.
Yeah.
I had a really wild experience recently. We were doing some energy work together, And I took on some of Ellie's pain to try and like figure out how to alchemize it. And in doing that, I attached myself to it. And then it took me a couple of days because it was so deep. It was like the deepest energy that I've ever had to feel in my body, because you've got a deep journey here, my lady. And I was like astonished. It took me a while to clear it, and it was a beautiful experience, and it allowed me to have a bunch of empathy and compassion for you and your journey.
Yeah.
Because I've never had to deal with that level of pain.
Yeah.
It was like so heavy.
Yeah.
But I attached onto it because I was playing Captain Saberho, you
Yep.
know, that
Yep.
that program you mentioned earlier. It's a disempowerment program. I was trying to take away her power,
Oh.
take away your pain, because there was some level of me who didn't think you were powerful, or was projecting my powerlessness onto you. That
Yeah.
you could feel it.
And you were coming from a pure place because you saw me. Like, I was really feeling real heavy.
But this is how easily all these programs can
Right.
sneak in. And like, even though we were doing energy work and I was trying to help, while that program is running, even though my intention was maybe good, while that program is running, it can jump on, because that's how they work. These programs have their own consciousness. They jump on to whatever it is we're doing, and then they have a fun ride because they take over, and then we don't realize it until later, or sometimes later in life, when we reflect back, oh, why was I doing that for all those years? Why was I showing up like that?
Yeah. And be careful, right? Because we can say all this and someone could go, okay, I'll just release all my pain because it's not mine. It's like, You got to do the work to see what is yours and what is not yours, and really feel into the energy of these programs. Like, I recently, I run this program that I don't want to live. It's a really heavy, dense one for me. And as I'm working through this, I'm like, when I'm feeling into it, I'm like, I don't really believe this. I don't really like want to not live, and I do want to be here. And when I started feeling into it, I was like, oh, this isn't mine. This came from a very particular parent who's run this program my whole life. And that gave me freedom in itself, knowing like, man, Ellie, you've been carrying this for so long, you thought it was yours, and this is not yours, baby. And so that one has been the big one that I'm working through, because it's been so ingrained deeply into me. But understanding and knowing that like I don't need to carry that anymore. But then other programs where I feel into it, I'm like, oh yeah, that one's mine for sure. So be careful. You got to do the work and be responsible over yourself to know what is not yours and what is yours.
Yeah, and these programs that we speak of can get very easily created. And an example to contrast that of one that I created within myself was when my mum left when I was around 6. Because I was so enmeshed with her, I was then worried that I wasn't going to be okay. So I kept on saying in my mind, am I going to be okay? I'm not going to be okay. Am I going to be okay? I'm not going to be okay. And that energy of survival got locked in, that worry, that flight, freeze, like nervous system freaked out, like I'm not safe. I don't know if I'm going to get through this. Powerlessness. I can't handle this. All those programs got created in that moment, and that is something that I created. So just to contrast, so now you're hearing like that is something I created. That's something for me to heal within myself. That isn't something I can release back to anyone. That is my pain to heal. That is my energy that I created, that came from a distortion. And that's me. I've got to work on that, versus like something that we absorb off someone and we're holding on to until we bring our light to it, and then we realize, oh, this isn't even a belief of mine. I've just been holding it.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I realized one of the programs that I definitely created was like, if I don't have a successful career, then I'm nothing. And like when I feel into that, it's like, that's neither of my parents, like that's mine. So it's like, you got to do the work to really see and feel. Like, feel into this stuff. Like, it will show you everything.
And it takes time. Yeah. It takes time.
It's a journey, y'all. Okay? Have compassion for yourself as you move through it.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that Rachel always says is, let the old you die.
The old you must die.
The old you must die. Let it die. If you want to evolve into a new being, if you want to be a new enlightened being of the new earth, let that old version of you die. Because all that fear, all that shame, all that guilt, all the unworthiness, the insecurity, every program that comes from lack, fear, powerlessness, that's been holding you back and unconsciously manifesting in your life, you have to be willing to let that die.
Oof.
You have to.
That hit me.
And that's what we teach. We teach on how to do that on an energetic level. And it doesn't happen overnight. It does take time. We're year and a half into this work, and it becomes part of you. It becomes who you are. That's the beauty of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's never about a quick fix. It's never about a magic pill, or it's never about seeing the magical healer that's going to help you. It's about learning the skills to really understand, who am I? What programs am I running? How can I unconditionally love myself right now? How can I become more love, and then give that love to everyone in the world, especially our beautiful partners like mine. So
beautiful. To everyone at home, thank you so much for listening. Check us out at mastersofselfuniversity.com if you want to set up a free consultation to work with any of our coaches. We also offer group classes, and we have a monthly membership twice a month where you'll get live sessions with Rachel and the other coaches. Share, subscribe, like, comment, whatever you got to do. And thank you guys so much for being here. We love you. Welcome to the Age of Aquarius. And we will see you out there in the battlefield of love. Bye, everyone.